Peace, family. You are listening to the Classroom and the Cell podcast. This is your brother, Marc Lamont Hill, and I am joined by
your other brother, Mumia Jamal.
Mumia, this has been a crazy week in global politics, man. I'm watching rebellions go on in Haiti right now. You know, people in the Haitian public, everyday citizens saying, we're going to push back against any attempt at UN intervention because, you know, as imperial, we don't want Western imperialism invading us. We don't need outside forces telling us what our agenda is or who our leaders are. I'm looking in Israel, and we just saw Iran strike Israeli targets in retaliation from Iranian targets being hit in Damascus. We are seeing some real resistance coming from different places. And the news stories are different. You don't normally hear about Israel getting hit with a retaliatory strike. You don't hear as much about Haitian people, although they've always fought for self-determination.
This is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
We're hearing increasingly vocal and powerful kind of pushbacks to Western imperialism everywhere. What do you say?
Well, don't forget what's happening in the Sudan and in Mali.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I think this is a potentially, I mean, it's too early to say, but potentially like a decolonization or anti-colonization spirit being expressed in parts of the world that we thought were quiescent. You know, you get to a point you don't expect to hear things from certain people, but people are people everywhere on the planet. And the spirit of resistance is generated by oppression and people, getting tired of that shit. And you were talking about Haiti and the UN. Well, last time Blue Helmets came in, they left a trail of dysentery and disease.
That's right.
So abuse of children, right? The so-called peacekeepers did not respond peacefully to the needs and the wants of the Haitian people. So they have, it's kind of like Black Americans in Tuskegee. They have experience. And therefore, they don't want to hear that, we're coming to help you. You know, and I know when colonialists come, they come to help themselves. When
this is a call from Pennsylvania State Correctional Institution, Mahanoy. This call is subject to recording and monitoring.
When capitalists come, they come to exploit you and to profit. You dig? And also we think about this. All of us live now in a post-Iraq world. And they remember how when Americans came in there with all that BS and those lies, weapons of mass destruction, they will greet us as liberators and throw flowers at us because we're bringing freedom. You know that.
Those fantasies.
Yeah, that was a colonialist fantasy based on nothing other than masking our profiteering, and millions of dollars were made for Halliburton and every other company that could get a toehold in Iraq. But is Iraq better from that experience? No. This was, foreign policy experts say this is the greatest foreign policy blunder in the history of the United States. And we're talking about Iran. Think about this. Iran was isolated before the Iraq War. And because Iran is a Persian country, not an Arab country. They may be Muslim, but they're Shia, right? A majority Shia community. Saddam Hussein, when he heard rumors and reports about his country being attacked, he said, no, you're crazy. The Americans are not that stupid. They'll never do that because it didn't make sense to him. He knew that if he got knocked off, the Shias who were held enthralled by his and his government's power would break free. So Americans did bring liberation, but not the kind they intended, because what they did is they created what? A Shia superstate, right? The Iraq they created is mostly Shia in terms of government, and they're closer to Iran than they are to the Americans. And they want the Americans out. So this is an interesting moment, is it not?
Super interesting moment. And when I think about what's possible, I'm excited, partly because, again, we're starting to challenge taken for granted assumptions about how the world works. Specifically, the idea that UN peacekeeping forces are actually peacekeeping when, in fact, one, the peace ain't there because of Western imperialism, and they're not peacemaking either. They not only are not peacekeeping, they're not peacemaking. So
that's right.
That's important. The idea that you can resist blue helmets, you can resist boots on the ground from the UN, is something most people didn't question as everyday citizens. We're like, they're crazy over there, and we need to come straighten it out. This idea that we need Western power to quell the natives is something that we're beginning to challenge. The fact that we're beginning to really publicly recognize that the West doesn't have the capacity to produce, it doesn't have the capacity or the moral authority to impose peace or safety or justice. And to see people publicly challenging that, and that it not just be common sense that that's the solution, is amazing, right? The idea that we're finally saying, yo, the U.S. shouldn't be picking other people as leaders. More and more people are saying that. And then also, particularly on the Israel point, you know, the idea that someone has a right to strike back against a Western power, whether it's Israel, U.S., France, Germany. Look, people have a right to self-defense. And it at least is now part of the conversation in a way that it wasn't before.
That's right, because we're living in a transformed era. We're seeing things that we have never seen before, right? You know, a lot of it, I think, is the degradation, right, of the West, right, after Iraq. Think about this. America was at least claimed to be the only superpower in the world when the Iraq War started. You know, and what began with a big bang, right? Remember Bush said shock and awe? What began with the Big Bang ended with a whimper. And the same could be said about Afghanistan. They got their asses out of there with toot sweet, with the quickness. You did?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Go ahead. Go.
The difference is now with alternative media and grassroots voices and social platforms, it's harder for them to re-narrate or misrepresent what happened. Like, you know, this is a generation of people that didn't really understand we got our ass kicked in Vietnam. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
Right.
Because of how the dominant narrative was able to frame it. But now it's harder and harder to do. It's harder and harder to talk about these struggles in ways that are one-sided because you have a multiplicity of voices that are narrating them, and that's so important.
That is important. You're absolutely right. But we have a media that we did not possess before, and it's decentered in a way. Really what we have is, in a real sense, for the first time in American history, democratic media. I don't call it social media. I call it anti-social media because of its psychological effect on children and the damage it does, especially young girls, right, who are bullied into suicide and what have you. But I do think it's a democratic medium in that it is not decentered. This is not the voice of Washington. This is not the voice of the government. This is not the voice of the corporate media. It's other people doing research and reporting around the traditional corporate mediums, and they're hitting people. I mean, think about this. What changed Vietnam was the media. When people saw what was happening in their homes, they were like, oh, my God, it did two things. It built an anti-war movement that was impossible without the media, right? But it also educated Americans about all of the hell that was breaking loose in Vietnam,
Right?
Now, because of social media or democratic media or technological medium that's decentered, people are seeing things in Gaza every day that are breaking not only heart, but psyche, mind, perception, right? Israel has never been looked at today the way they are today. Ever. That's a new thing. And while they have military power and they're backed by the United States, right, as a superpower, and I call them a regional hegemon in the Middle East.
For sure.
That does not make them popular or loved, but quite the reverse. People are looking at them as a bully. Yes, sir.
And that's how the tide changes. You know, it's one thing to say these people are being harmed, they're victims, you know, they're engaging in self-defense. When we feel that way about a nation or a people or a community or whatever, right, you know, you get public sympathy. But when people start to say, wait a minute, the U.S. is the bully here. Right. France is doing what? Germany's doing what? Israel's doing what? You know, now all of a sudden these nations are getting looked at differently.
I must jet because this brother wants to get on, and I love you, man. We'll do it again soon if I can.
We gonna do it soon, man. Love you, brother. I'll talk to you later in the week. On the move.
All right, give a hug to Malcolm for me.
You have 1 minute left.
Right,
the caller has hung up.
All right, family. You've been listening to the Classroom in the Cell podcast with Mumia and Jamal and Marc, Lamont, Hill. You catch all the episodes of the Classroom in the Cell right on the Marc, Lamont, Hill official YouTube channel. You can download the audio or you can listen to them and watch them online. Hit the like button so the algorithms know that you are in favor of this kind of radical political content, this type of beautiful political education. Let them know. Also, hit the subscribe button so we can expand our network and our friendship circle. And, of course, if you're so inclined, hit the join button and become a monthly subscriber of the channel, or go to Cash App or Venmo at MLHTV. Until next time, on the move. Peace.